In this session, we will consider this moment in our history and how practicing equity within our campaigns and organizations is central to being able to build long-term power. But at this moment, that may not be enough. Right now, we need to push ourselves beyond our limits of what we think is possible. Right now, folks are using the ballot measure as a tool to proactively fight white supremacy by developing bold campaigns to tear down racially unjust and oppressive systems. I'm Corinne Rivera Fowler. I'm the Policy and Legal Advocacy Director at BISC. My pronouns are she, her.
Hi, my name's Karina. I use she, her pronouns. I am the campaign manager for Yes for Minneapolis.
So 2020 was a pretty tremendously difficult year for all of us. The pandemic shone a spotlight on the racial and economic inequities and the white supremacy that exists in the systems and structures that have been built and were designed to hold down and oppress Black, Latinx, AAPI, Native Americans, and other traditional, marginalized, and directly impacted folks. George Floyd was one of 1,000 police killings that happened in 2020. Police brutality and the killing of an individual is one particular tragic act that is the outgrowth of larger systemic and institutional patterns of white supremacy that are pervasive throughout the systems of our society. White supremacy underpins policies and decisions that drive hiring, mortgages, housing, education, and the accumulation of wealth. Most pointedly, as we are all too aware, white supremacy is steeped into our criminal legal system. The movement for Black lives that began in 2013 when Trayvon Martin was murdered in that suburban neighborhood in Florida culminated last year across the nation as voters took action to reform policing in their cities. In the 2020 election, voters approved 19 of 20 ballot measures demanding more accountability for law enforcement, changes to policing operation, and expanded public oversight. In King County, Washington, voters approved a charter amendment that will require a special inquest into killings by law enforcement and mandate that a public attorney be provided to represent victims' families. Similar measures passed all over California. And this year, BISC is working with partners and municipalities as they continue to take action in their cities to tear down the racist roots of America's criminal legal system by reinventing and reimagining what it means to keep their cities safe. Karina, thank you for being with us today. Can you tell us about the measure you're pushing and what the policy is, and why you're choosing to use a ballot measure for this policy solution?
Absolutely. I think it helps to give some context to the big picture, and which is, as you said, following the murder of George Floyd last summer, we witnessed the young Black, Brown, Indigenous people spark a global uprising against state-sanctioned violence. And that all started here in Minneapolis. Our community demanded that our city leaders move away from violent policing and create a new department that addressed community safety holistically and with a public health approach. And so that was something that our city council initiated, but ultimately ended up being blocked from. And our fight is now being led by the community. The movement to change Minneapolis City Charter really empowers us to use our voices to take the city in a new direction. And I think it's also really critical to remember that this came from pre-existing organizing. This moment and movement to change Minneapolis City Charter didn't just pop up out of nowhere. Folks have been organizing around MPD, around the budget, and changing the infrastructure is just building on that work. And so we've gone through really great lengths to learn about the ballot measure process and the best ways to enact change quickly and efficiently and at the scale that's needed. And that's why we believe that a people's petition is the most effective way to ensure systemic reform and break down the barriers to racial justice here in Minneapolis. Ballot measures are a tool that people can use to help force action from legislatures and even bypass them altogether. And so we've taken lessons learned from cities and states across the country who have worked to utilize ballot measure processes to push forward on progressive policies.
Yeah, I think that in the case of police reform specifically, it's particularly important because, you know, people have had very little decision-making power, if ever, in their policing and in their community safety. And as we work to redefine what that safety means, you know, communities can collide with tricky politics. We're facing sometimes unfriendly city councils and mayors and, you know, other powerful interests that could work to stifle and block legislative action. And so it gives people an opportunity to really circumvent lawmakers and create and pass change that is really up to them, and gives the voters a chance to approve those things. And the oppression that we have felt just needs to be addressed head on and point blank. So I understand that the city council in your city in Minneapolis is proposing their own changes. And how does your petition differ, and why is it important that the people of Minnesota vote on issue 4?
Yeah, so I think for starters, it's important to know that our petition and our ballot measure is from the people. It's shaped by conversations our growing coalition has had over the last year, and with community input every step of the way. And so that's something that engagement process hasn't been there with the council's proposal. And while there are other amendments to propose, have been proposed to reform the Minneapolis Police Department, I think that, you know, some of them just don't quite go far enough to ensure the change that Minneapolis needs. Our proposal really transforms the Minneapolis Police Department and empowers communities to develop their own public safety solutions and upend toxic, violent culture of policing. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty complicated, and it's a lot to wrap your minds around. You know, you hear folks like trying to figure out what all this means and what it's going to look like, asking a lot of policy questions. And, you know, I answer them. I'm just like, you know, right now we're like pioneers. We're creating these brand new systems. We're imagining, you know, bold new structures. And as we do that, we also need to kind of like think about the long-term consequences of what we're doing and encourage conversations and building relationships. And I think Maurice was just saying, you know, co-creation of policies. You know, we're reimagining public safety, and that means housing and healthcare and mental health and all the support systems that we've never been able to have in our cities through public safety. I want to make sure I ask you, Karina, what support does your campaign need moving forward? What tools, resources, research, messaging, what can we do to help you succeed?
Yeah, thank you so much for asking this question. I think Minneapolis needs visionary leadership that really meets the gravity of the moment. And I think that people say, you know, the work started last summer is over, but it's actually just getting started. And that's why it's really important that we succeed in this fight. All eyes are on Minneapolis and the liberation of Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities and the next steps to tackle safety in this country. So we would really love for folks to support us by signing the petition, making a donation to the campaign, attending an event or a volunteer training, visiting the website to just get more information, and also following us on social media to stay up to date and informed.
Thank you so much for being here with us today. We have a session later on that I'm going to plug. We're going to dig deeper into using ballot measures as a tool to dismantle white supremacy and talk about some other policies that we're seeing and new bold ways of getting our seat at the table as we should be. In the next session, you'll see a video about VISC's Declaration of Cooperation Toolkit. And then there'll be a live conversation with our Strategic Partnerships Director, Mila Alayubi. She'll be joined by Esteban Munoz Howard from the Piper Fund and Prentice Haney from the Ohio Organizing Collaborative. They're going to talk about how we redefine the win by using the Declaration of Cooperation Toolkit. Thanks, everyone.